Hey everyone, welcome to the second installment of my devlog. In this vlog I'm going to do things a little bit differently, and I decided I'm going to focus a bit more on some gameplay interactions. So I decided to work on two different door concepts. The first one being a door that you need to interact with to open, and one where you need a key to be able to gain access. I do have an idea to work on a third door type which will require gravity to open, something similar to Amnesia. But until I get to learn more about how that might work, I decided to just keep it simple. So as you can see, I started using the standard Unreal assets to create a blueprint for my very first door. I of course had to figure out a way to open these doors in a specific way, so I had to use timelines to do that, or else my door would just open in one direction and close in another. After going through different options that were available to me, I was able to eventually find a way to open the door, let's say for example outwards, and then close it back inwards. It would be great to at some point be able to open and close the door at one specific rotation, but until I do that, this is going to have to do for now. Once I was finished with that, I decided to work a bit on my crosshair. I decided I was just sick and tired of having to see those debug lines drawn across my screen when interacting with everything. So I went and got myself a free icon for a crosshair on Google, which I then imported into the Unreal Engine, and I started working with that. I wasn't too sure how I was going to do it, if I was even happy with the size and the shape of it. I just decided to fiddle a bit with different color options and sizes until I found something that I liked. As you can see, this was my final product. I was quite happy with that, and now I had something to actually use to point with the items I'm going to interact with. That being said, I also thought to myself that I should probably work on a couple of sound systems as well, for example my flashlights and the doors. But before I did that, I also just fixed my battery drain widget that would appear all the time. Now it only appears when I pick up my flashlight. With that behind me, I moved on to the second door. I pretty much just duplicated my original blueprint of the first door, but things had to be done a bit differently here, because the concept was to get a key or a trophy of some sort to actually open it. So I went to Sketchfab and I went to find myself a nice set of keys that I bought into Google, and those were going to be the props that I figured I'd use to open this door. So this is just pretty much like a demo concept. It's not going to be the final way of how I'm going to do this, but I decided to make this system a bit different in a sense where you would overlap the item as opposed to just pick it up. So as you can see, I'm busy working through different collision options and overlapping settings just to try and figure out how I'm going to do this. Ideally, the player needed to overlap with a specific item, in this example that key, and once they had that key they would then be able to open the door itself. Without that key, the door just would not open. So as you can see, I'm busy troubleshooting. Eventually I do figure out what the issue is, and I was able to pick up my key and destroy it at the same time, so that was great. Once I got that up and running, I do just work on a few other conditions, such as, hey, do you have the key? And if you don't, you need to go and find the key. I will probably at some point incorporate widgets that will actually let the player know what they need to do, but I also want to just work with sounds as well, you know, giving the idea of, you know, you're going to a door and the door's actually locked and you can hear it locked and you can't open it. So with that being said, I went back into the blueprint, started working on timelines so I could work on the rotation of that door being open once the key was received. I did this using box collisions, of course. I would use that to collide with my door, and it would then activate a trigger where my door would open up on a certain rotation. And once that was set in position, I used the begin overlap to cast to my actual player itself and start working out the system in which, once it's overlapped, it'll play the timeline and it'll open the door in a specific rotation itself. I also wanted to compensate for the fact that we could perhaps have a sound play, like I said earlier. So if you do not have the key, instead of it, or as well as not telling you that you don't have the key, it will also play a sound that will indicate that there's no key. With that being said, I went and imported a whole bunch of audio files that I had gathered and collected off screen. I'll put a link to the site where I got them for you in the description, so you can have a look. It's a really great resource for your games if you need sounds for jump scares and just interactions as well. Right, so once they were all imported, I decided just to sort of seat them where they needed to go in all the necessary places, such as my flashlight, you know, the clicking on and off, as well as my door being locked and being opened. So I spent a bit of time just sort of fine-tuning that system in my game itself by adding these sounds across the board. And I quite like it. I enjoyed it. I thought it brought a bit of variety to the game, as I'll show you right now. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So I start my game. Here's my crosshair, as I previously mentioned, and if I want to interact with my flashlight, press E, and now my flashlight widget appears, which is awesome. I can go ahead and pick up these certain items like these batteries, and my system's still intact. Everything's working just fine. If I go to the store, I need to press E to open it, and I can go E to close it. Perfect. If I go to the second door I made, you can hear it's locked. But if I go pick up this key, at the moment I have a print screen telling me that I got a key, and if I go to the door, it automatically opens. Perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for as a starting point. Alright, now that that was done, I decided to work a bit on my level. What I decided to do is just go to Sketchfab and download a house that I could bring into a new level. I had to do this all off screen because I had to add collisions to every single part of this house and create a blueprint for all the different sections. So that would have been a complete and utter waste of video time. So once I did that off screen, I imported it, as you can see, into this brand new level. Once everything was in place, I of course added a terrain, as you can see there, with just a basic texture, and I started working on the lighting itself. I wasn't going to be too critical of how the lighting looks because this landscape was going to change. There were going to be trees, hills, and other different architectures, but as you can see, I'm busy working through the process volume. I'm adding things like a fog fall off, as well as just changing some light intensities as well. I also decided to change the actual day to a bit of night, but not too dark, because I needed to still do a bit of testing. And without any materials on the house, if I were to go to unlit mode, it would be rather bright, so it would be quite hard to work in. Anyway, with that being said, once that was done, I decided just to double check my flashlight, see if I was completely happy with the lighting that I would get from it, which of course I was. So I decided to work on the next system, the jump scare. As you can see here, I bought a standard trigger box just to put in the hallway here as a testing point. And the idea is to have a bit of a jump scare in the game. This is a basic starting point from a jump scare. So once you pass the trigger box, it's going to play a loud sound, and the idea was to have some form of entity walk past you. I decided I was just going to use the standard mannequin with an Unreal itself for now as a placeholder. I can obviously change it up with some other assets from the store or from Miximo later on. I was a bit silly here, and couldn't quite realize why I couldn't get the mannequin to show when I realized I was adding static meshes instead of skeletal meshes. That being said, once I added the mannequin in, I also chose to bring in the connect the standard walk forward animation as an option instead of having to redo the animation itself. And once that was in place, I was ready to start working on the logic. I also brought in, as you can see there, a arrow which I called target location, because once this jump scare activated, the mannequin would walk to a certain location. So yeah, I'm just putting it into my scene, into my level, just trying to find a nice way to position to locate it. And now I realized that at some point I messed up my orientation, and my mannequin was at 90 degrees and my arrow was at negative 90 degrees. So I pretty much quite a silly problem to have, but I did a couple of resets there and I was finally able to position it all correctly. That being said, I decided that I needed to in fact move it to a different location because it was like glaring through the walls in the house. So I moved the trigger box to the staircase over here and the jump scare just beneath it, just behind the wall. Okay, thank you for making it this far into the video, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's test out this jump scare and let's see how it works. So I should just pick up my torch, turn it on, and once I walk up these stairs it should trigger the actual jump scare itself. There we go, perfect. I'm quite happy with that. I could obviously work on the sound effects a bit more, and I'm going to change this mannequin to something a little bit more creepy later on, relevant to the story and the lore of the game itself. So I think this wraps up this video, this vlog itself. So thank you very much for watching yet again, and in my next vlog I think I'm going to work on just doing a couple of improvements on my level, doing a couple of changes, and just fix a couple of bugs that I have noticed throughout these demonstrations. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thanks again.